Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Matt here, and as you can probably tell, I'm doing another dry fire training video. The first one I posted actually seemed to be pretty well received, and there's definitely some interest there, so I figured I'd make a few more of these and kind of make a little mini series, I guess. There's no way I would record every training session that I do here, because quite often I just come down here and do a quick 15-20 minute session that I don't want to have to worry about turning on the camera and whatnot, of course. But I really like dry fire training at home. I feel like it's very beneficial, especially for the precision rifle discipline. And it's almost like training at, I would say, like 80 to 90% of what you could do with live fire. Obviously, you can't do things like wind call. And since I'm using a rimfire rifle here, I keep the safety on so I don't actually dry fire it, but I can still have a bit of a trigger press. But of course, I don't actually feel the break. So that's another little downside. But I'd rather train at, 80, 90% 4 to 5 times a week than only once a week at 100% and dedicate a lot of time to go to the range. So this is a really great way to practice, and a lot of this shooting discipline is about how steady you can be off of weird positions and barricades, and this is just a great way to practice that. So definitely check out the first video if you haven't. I didn't actually realize I touched on a lot of different interesting topics in that video until I was editing it. I touched on things like how to practice engaging multiple targets with dry fire at home, holding versus dialing, support side, weak side stages, and target acquisition. So again, if any of those topics interest you, definitely check out the first episode, I guess, in this dry fire training series, because I don't want to repeat myself too much within the same series of videos. But if you're wondering why I'm holding a pair of earmuffs here, which obviously you wouldn't need normally for dry fire practice, I feel like this is also a really good opportunity when you're training at home to try out different equipment to see if it works for you. So I recently just picked these up. I actually purchased these from Cabela's of all places. I usually don't buy things at Cabela's, but I was just kind of roaming around and I saw these on the shelf for like $20, $24 or something like that, which is pretty dirt cheap. These are actually a pair of electronic ear pro, which is really nice if you're in like a match environment where you have to hear range commands and what the RO is saying. Using the passive plugs isn't really the best thing ever, which I've been using quite often, but electronic ear pro is definitely the way to go in order to hear the important things that you need to. And I'm pretty rough on mine, so I generally always damage the wires and the connection. So I decided to pick up this really cheap pair to see if it works. So I'm going to wear it here for a few practice stages to see that if they'll get in the way. I really like them because they seem to be pretty thin. They taper really nicely down towards the side, so I feel like they'd be pretty optimal. So when I'm in a weird, funky position on a barricade, there's less likelihood that it'll kind of peel the earmuff away from my head and obviously break the acoustic seal, which is not good if you want to protect your hearing. So that's kind of why I have these. I'll probably just wear them here and there just to make sure that they're going to work with this rifle for the type of precision shooting that I do. For this training session, I think I'm going to work off the barrel for some of it. I really like practicing from the barrel because it definitely gives some more awkward surfaces to practice getting steady off of, and we'll see what we do from there. Of course, as usual, safety first, double check everything, make sure all your mags are empty and that there's no ammo anywhere. But I already know everything's safe. It's already been checked beforehand, and I'm going to go ahead and throw in my little training belt setup, which I touched on in my first video. This is just a really quick way that I can leave a belt set up here, so when I come down to do some quick dry fire training, I can quickly just pop on this belt setup and I have everything that I need in order to run some mock practice stages. I got my pump pillow and my shot timer, as well as my mag pouches and whatnot. So here we go. Let's just think of a stage here. I already have one in mind. Again, I'm going to work off the barrel first because that's something that I did want to practice today. And I've done this practice stage before. I really like this because it's, again, a great way to practice all the different surfaces that a barrel could normally be presented to you at a stage. So it's very simple. It's a 9-round practice stage. You're going to take 3 practice shots off the top of the barrel here, ground your rifle, flip the barrel to the side with the curved edges facing yourself, another 3 shots, and lastly ground the rifle again and flip the barrel so it's on its side pointing what would be downrange, and take another 3 shots off the top. Again, 9 rounds, and it presents you all the different ways you would shoot off a barrel at a match basically. The reason why I ground my rifle between each transition is because generally speaking at a match, if there's a large kind of awkward barricade you have to manipulate like this, it's required that you ground the rifle for safety concerns, obviously. So again, I like to practice how I would actually shoot a match when I'm doing it here in a dry fire situation. As per usual, as I mentioned before in the previous video, I always keep in mind good habits like proper target acquisition and things like that, because it's really easy to get lazy when you're doing dry fire drills, and you don't want to develop any bad habits that could carry over to when you're actually at the range. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop on these earmuffs to try out, and I'll turn on my shot timer. As per usual, I use 1 minute and 45 seconds for my par time, even if it's a 2-minute stage, just to help me become more fluid and efficient at my movements. I'm going to first look at the stage and think to myself, how would I approach this if this was presented to me at a match situation. What's pretty interesting in looking at a barricade like this is there's obviously different ways you can set your rifle up on these different surfaces, but there's pros and cons to everything. Sometimes you can really take your time and get a nice solid shooting platform off of a specific barricade, but it might not be ideal for that given stage if there's a lot of transitions, because you don't want to waste time setting up your rifle and not, timing out, not having all your shots off. So there's a balance between getting nice and steady so that you have the highest chance of actually hitting your target, but not wasting time and overdoing it basically. So I have a plan in mind, and I'm going to go ahead and try that, and we'll talk about it once I run through the stage here. So here we go. I got my Barricade bag. And another thing I'm going to do to just practice holdovers is I'm going to pretend I'm going to choose 3 different stickers on the wall here. I'm going to use 1 sticker for each surface, and I'll choose a different holdover number to practice my holdovers for each one. I showed this in my first video, but I just have some random numbers taped to my chassis here. And if I want to practice holdovers, I'll just pick, some numbers on here to practice using the reticle. And every so often I'll change out this piece of tape with new numbers on it, so I'm not getting accustomed to just the same exact holdovers over and over. All right, barrel stage, take 1. Here we go. The rifle, flip the barrel. All right, so I'm using another target here and practicing my holdovers with 3.3 mils. Ground the rifle, turn the barrel. And my next holdover here is 4.7 mils. And that was just about 76 seconds, which isn't too bad. So plenty of time. You can see I was pretty efficient with my movements. Obviously, I've run through this stage before, so I kind of knew how I wanted to approach the stage. But just to give you a quick breakdown, by the way, the earmuffs were pretty good, didn't get in the way at all. I chose, as you can see here, to run my bipod a little bit inwards so that I could fit the footprint of my rifle on the top of the barrel here. So I'm using my rear bag under the pistol grip as support. And, I can control the elevation of the front of my rifle with that. Another way to do it, if you have the option to, is to run the bipod as close as possible to the mag well here, so you can use the bag on the buttstock instead of the pistol grip, which I would say is more comfortable and even more stable. But the reason why I chose not to do that is because then I would have to manipulate the bipod even more throughout the stage in order to get it ready for the other surfaces. So things like that, how to optimize your movement in a stage is really easy to practice when you're doing dry fire at home. All right, so I've run through the stage a couple times now, probably 2 or 3 more times, and I've come to figure out basically how exactly I manipulate everything during the stage in order to be as efficient as possible. So what I like to do now is I like to make an unrealistic stage, like you would never see this in a match, and you can use the opportunity like this, dry firing and home, to make up stages that are more difficult than what would probably ever be at a match, but makes you a little bit better in terms of how you're training. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make this stage so it's 2 shots each surface, but we're gonna do the whole sequence twice. So top, side, and then side long ways, and then repeat that again, top, side, side long ways. Again, always grounding the rifle between each transition and taking 2 shots each surface. And I'm gonna aim at a different sticker on the wall for each of the surfaces and use, again, different holdovers to practice. So let's see if we can do that within the allotted time. And again, this is really practicing how quickly I can become stable on these surfaces, as well as my transitions with manipulating the barrel. So I timed out with 1 shot, 1 shot not taken, but that's exactly what I'm trying to do. Is I'm trying to push myself to the uncomfortable limit where I'm starting to time out. So it really pushes me to try and transition as fast as possible while I'm still only taking a shot or pressing the trigger when I feel like it would translate to a really good hit with live fire. Because I think there is a balance of not timing out, but also having really good shots and not wasting any shots that you take during a stage. Another thing I should mention about practicing with a barrel indoors like this on a hard, flat surface is it's actually more difficult than what it would usually be at a range, because usually the barrel is cradled a little bit by the ground if it's in dirt or grass or snow especially. But when it's on a flat surface like this, it tends to roll a lot easier. And as you can see, controlling the barrel under your rifle is something that's pretty awkward. So when you practice on a flat surface like this, it's actually easier when you get to the to get to the range and do it there. So awesome practice. All right, so as you can see here, I have the Barricade set up in this weird sideways position low to the ground. I want to do a little bit of practice with some rifle work kind of low to the ground. A lot of the recent dry fire training I've been doing has been kind of, thigh level and above. So a little bit closer to the ground here, it makes transitioning a little bit awkward because you're kind of working, on your knees mostly, and you can kind of bang them up. So having knee pads or like a shooting mat might be a good idea. This is a really awkward height for me, about the same height as like a milk crate or something like that. And with these ports here, given the size, it also makes putting the rifle in and out of them a little bit trickier. So you have to be really careful with how you do that. You don't want to smash your scope up or, the crown of your barrel into your Barricade when you're putting it through. So it's always a bit of a good work on the dexterity with your rifle. And so maybe we'll just do a simple stage here. We'll work between the middle and the top surface here, just transitioning after every two shots. So we'll do 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I'll probably use 5 different stickers on the wall and choose, again, let's just use the first 5 numbers here to practice my holdovers. I think that's going to be a really good practice, and we'll also see if I can incorporate the pump pillow into some of these positions to get a nice solid shooting position. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm also going to wear the new pair of earmuffs here because when you're lower to the ground, that's usually when you get these weird awkward positions with your neck and head where it might kind of interfere with the earmuffs. So we'll wear these to make sure that they're all good and go from there. I'll probably take the bipod off for this stage. Here we go. So I'm going to use the pump pillow here into the chest. And I don't know what this position is called, but like a leapfrog position to get nice and close to the ground. Target acquisition. All right, that was at 86 seconds, so not too bad, about 20 seconds to spare. I found like my movement on the ground was okay. Definitely not too easy on the knees, so I probably won't do that too many more times. And their earmuffs were pretty good. So I wanted to touch on some pretty cool products on the market you can buy to enhance your indoor dry fire training. The first one that comes to mind is the IDTS. I think it stands for Indoor Dry Fire Training System. And that's a really cool product. It basically comes with two parts. The first is an optical lens that you install onto the objective of your scope, and that allows the scope to focus in really close. And the second thing that it comes with is a board or a poster basically with various targets printed on it. So that allows people that live in a little bit tighter environments, like an apartment, for example, to use this IDTS system and practice dry fire at home if they don't have the space like in a larger basement or something like that. So that's really cool. The poster that it comes with, I think you can choose the environment where the targets are in too, so you can best match it to like the environment your range is at, which is really neat. And it's obviously a little bit more realistic in terms of how the targets are laid out through the landscape and how you have to kind of acquire them and find them on the field. So I think that's a really cool option. For me personally, I don't feel the need for it because I do have the space available to me where my scope, the strike eagle here, can focus down so I can see my targets on the wall clearly and they're not all blurry and stuff like that. But that's a really good option, again, if you live in an apartment or something like that. I believe you can set it as close as 11 feet again, which is, I think anyone has 11 feet to practice dry fire with, and that's a really good system to look into if you need it. But for me, I find the stickers on the wall method saves me, you know, the $200, and I personally don't need it for my purposes. All right, so I pulled the camera in a little bit closer. I'm going to do some practice with using the tripod as rear support. This is a technique that is fairly new to me. Only in the past couple months have I been practicing this, but it's a really, really good option in terms of stabilizing your rifle on a barricade where you only have front support if it's allowed. A tripod being used for rear support like this is not allowed in the monthly ORPS matches, but for the CRPS matches and the NRS match, it is allowed. So it's something I like to practice here and there. It is pretty straightforward in terms of how you do it, but I feel like it does take a lot of practice to get really comfortable with it. But the biggest thing about using a tripod like this during a stage is actually if there is movement and a lot of transitions in it. I think moving with a tripod and your rifle and your front bag can become really clumsy really easily. So that's also something that's really good to practice, a lot of movement with the tripod, but I probably won't do that today. We're just gonna do a little bit more of a simple stage here. I think what I'll do is I'll just take 2 shots off this ledge and then alternate between this flat edge here and this slanted side here, which you can't really see, but that just forces me to break position between each 2 shots. Again, I'm going to practice holdovers as we do this, and we'll see how efficiently I can get the tripod set up for the rear support. What I like to do is I'll put my arm around the tripod leg first, but I won't pull it into the buttstock. I'll always acquire my target in my sights first, and once I'm pretty much on target, I'll pull the tripod end closer to my buttstock and then kind of anchor it down with my support hand, and then I'll close the bolt and press the shots off when it's really nice and stable. It's there. And again, movement around a tripod can be really clumsy, so you want to be very effective at that. And there we go. That was 95 seconds. Pretty simple stage with a tripod, but I just wanted to show that there is definitely a technique to practice there, even though the methodology behind using a tripod for rear support is pretty straightforward. Definitely something to practice. So going on to the topic of trying new gear and equipment during dry fire practice at home is this little piece of Picatinny rail right here on the ACC forend. Now, this is actually a Magpul cantilever mount for a flashlight I had on one of my ARs, but now that my ARs here in Canada are prohibited, they're basically just paperweights. So I slapped this piece on my precision rifle setup here, and I actually use this as a thumb rest. Obviously, I'm not putting a flashlight on this rifle, but what I like to do is when I'm on a barricade, I like to extend my support hand out and use my thumb, my support side thumb, to apply pressure and tension into the front of my rifle in order to help stabilize the rifle, and I find it works really nicely. I know some people like to come up with their hand onto the scope, onto the front of the scope here, to kind of do the same thing. I do use that method sometimes if the barricade doesn't allow me to put my hand up against the forend, if it's, you know, limited space or whatnot, but that's definitely my preference. And you can see, since the piece does stick out a little bit more from the side here, it gives me a lot more surface area to work with my thumb there. And the thing with the ACC chassis is here, there's really not much material. And when I had my thumb there, a lot of the time I was also contacting the barrel, which obviously isn't great. You want to try and leave that free floated. So that's what I'm be testing out recently. It's actually working really nicely. It seems to work, and it's just, you know, something I already had. There's a company called Grey Ops that actually makes a really nice aluminum CNC machined thumb rest for precision rifles, specifically for this purpose. But I can't find it in Canada, and it's also like 45 US. So this is kind of a budget version of it, but I think it works really nicely. And so far, I think I'm gonna leave it on the rifle because I quite like it. All right, so as I mentioned in my first dry fire video, I always end these training sessions with some offhand practice. I always run through the same 12 round stage, once with a sling and once without a sling. It's just 4 from standing, 4 from sitting, and 4 from prone. Very straightforward, but I love practicing this because it just keeps my offhand skills a little bit fresher, because with the ORPS matches, we're always guaranteed 1 offhand stage a month, and you do occasionally see them at the CRPS matches as well. So always get to practice, and I always do this at the end when I'm most fatigued, and it's probably the most difficult. So here we go. So I'm gonna end the video off here. Thank you again for watching, and take care. I will see you guys in the next video.